Well, in my own opinion and in my own reflection, I feel that the struggle of 1976 was not really achieved. Asive, you meant to be taking responsibility right here, because one, you guys, when there are certain issues addressed about women, you guys step back. I am from the Eastern Cape. But when it's time to be a happy family and be a man and a woman, you are there. In a town called Gonubi. Well, I'm a student currently doing my second year in public management governance. I am also an ambassador for ethical, moral, and professional leadership. Tomorrow they come back and say, here is a program, here's an initiative. From where? It feels like to us, these programs are created just in your sleep. You're creating programs in your sleep, and then you think that they're implementable. They're all good on paper, but who is the implementer? What skill does the implementer have?
Tabile Lungwane, I am a law-abiding citizen.
We Africans, and we know that in our homes, men are always regarded as the head, and women are regarded as the neck. And that has also been portrayed in politics. Women have been, yes, we do have powerful women, but I feel that women have been put into to positions just so that there is gender equality.
I'm currently a first-year student at the University of Johannesburg, studying public management and governance.
And I feel that if we actually recognize women that have power, women that can speak, women that feel liberated enough to actually be in policy.
My name is Mathaba Machodi.
We are not where we were yesterday, today, and we are not where we are supposed to be. It's like we are at a crossroad where we're supposed to go right or left.
I'm a baby young black man from Limpopo, and I'm a chemical engineering graduate from the University of Johannesburg, and I'm currently working at the University of Johannesburg at the chemical engineering as a technical officer. Thank you.
To just a question of, what are we looking for today? I would, perhaps to some degree, I would want to argue that it's not necessarily that the youth of today does not really know what they want, or perhaps what is our struggle. I think in principle we understand that in principle our struggling really, it's economic freedom. And I know some obviously make use of this statement, for popularity. But I'm saying, in common, all of us, the challenge that we have is it's about survival. And for us to be able to survive, you need resources, you need financial masses, and all of that links to economic freedom. It links to your economic freedom as an individual. Now, if then we're going to go back, for instance, to the question of education, I mean, she just raised quite a very valid point around the education in terms of, the opportunities that we have in the so-called previously disadvantaged schools or, public schools versus the multiracial schools or the private schools. On those ones, you've got better facilities. But in the rural areas, the facilities are not there. But this goes even beyond just the primary and high school or basic education level. It also goes to the level of tertiary. You've got a young person who gets to a tertiary, who is using NSFAS, and NSFAS says to you, we can only cover for this and that, and we'll give you perhaps 2,500 for your for your books or things like that. And when you check what is required, the total budget that you need for you just for a year, to cover for those basic costs, books and stuff like that, it requires you at least to have 6,000 or 7,000. Now, this young person, he is in the institution, but through NSFAS, through the assistance of government, which I think we should obviously commend. But I'm saying, is it enough? I don't think it is enough, and I don't think it is assisting in the long run, because at the end of the day, you are going to have this young person trying by all means to survive in this highly economized education system without the economic muscles for him to survive. So that is one of the problems. But I think the other problem is in the education system itself. I mean, it's really, I'm trying to look for a proper word for this, because I don't want to use improper words, but it's really messed up. It's messed up in that it says to me, as a young person coming from a rural area in Mpumalanga, it says to me, I must acquire education so that after education I will be able to get a job for my survival. And remember, what is my struggle? My struggle is to be able to survive. My struggle is to be able to have financial means, financial muscles for my own being and my family. Now, ultimately, if then the education system says, if I've got education, I'm going to get a job, it says to me, it creates expectations to me that I'm gonna, I only have to do this much. After this much, I will automatically get this. Now, today we've got a challenge of jobs in South Africa. I mean, this is an open, exactly. But, and part of the problems is that our system says to me, I must go and study. After studying, I must wait for a job. The system does not say to me, how do I make use of that skills that which I've acquired from the tertiary institutions or any other higher institution of higher, any institution of higher learning? How do I make use of that skill to actually survive without having to wait for somebody to give me a job? And in that context, that's why I still argue we're not free. Because mentally it says to us, we can't be able to make use of the skills, the very same skills that we're saying our counterparts had an opportunity to acquire. Today we have the opportunity, maybe not entirely, but to some degree we have. But still what the system says to you, I mean, it does not assist you to understanding how you make use of that skill to actually survive without having to depend on somebody else. And the system then of apartheid, the principle was the same. As a black person, you must depend on somebody else to provide you a job.
Yeah.
The education system today still says the same thing.
Yeah.
Study, after studying, wait for somebody to offer you a job.
Yeah.
If you can't, if somebody doesn't offer a job, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
You get what? So I'm saying that is the problem. It's not only just about us not being given the skills or acquired the skills or being unable to get the skills, but it's also even beyond that. Even after you've got the skills, we're still unable to make use of these skills to benefit ourselves. So for me, there is more that we need to look at than just the question of what the government can do for us. But I think, moreover, particularly if we're to speak about political organizations, look, all these people, they always promise us manna from heaven. You know, the best of the best and what's not. But the reality of the matter is, I think for me, some people like to argue and say, look, non-governmental NGOs should be the one that deals with communal issues and what's not. But I think, for me, where I'm standing, political organizations are part of those people that are actually failing us. Not just only the current leader of the government being the ANC, but also even the others, because what they are doing is they are taking advantage of our vulnerability into their interest. All of them, they come and make use of this, talk about these nice things, knowing exactly that they're not going to be able to do things that they know for a fact that are not going to be practical. One comes and says, we are going to create 20,000 jobs, knowing exactly, if we get into power, knowing exactly that they're not going to be able to do that because of the economical challenges that the world faces today, the country faces today, but they're unable to say, with that which we have now, how do we make use of it to better equip ourselves, to ensure that ourselves we are economically able. So I'm saying this is a very complex subject. It's not only just a question of what we acquire now and what we need, but it is also about what we can do and what other people, other organizations, other structures, and members of society can contribute into the whole issue. So the bottom line, generally, that we have now in South Africa is that we have created, and perhaps this can also be blamed, perhaps to during the time when when apartheid was abolished and moving into democracy, to say that there was a great expectation that was created to say that with freedom everything will come free, and that's why today there's this culture generally in South Africa that you must expect, and you must expect to get, and that's why today people they are expecting, and if they don't get, remember they've learned from the demolishment of apartheid, that if you want to deal with apartheid, this is what you must do. You must protest and ban and all of that. We all learn from history, and this is a tool that all of us have learned, or at least our elders learned, to say that for us to demolish apartheid was to strike and do all this, demolish all of this, do all these bad things that is happening today. And that's why people today, they believe that if you want to achieve something in South Africa, you must do that. You get what I'm saying? So I'm saying there is more to this than just the question of what we need to get or what we expect. But it also speaks to the approach that which was used before. And therefore now we need to understand, to say this is where we are now. And therefore, what is the better approach that you can use to address the current challenge that which we have today? But until we start discussing that, or at least confront those questions, unfortunately, I don't see us moving forward. If anything else, we'll continue fighting amongst ourselves, because we'll always fight. Because the problem is that, remember, during apartheid, the thinking during apartheid was that we had an enemy. The enemy was what? Was the apartheid system. And therefore, anything wrong that was happening with our country, we had to blame apartheid. But now apartheid is not there. Who then do we blame? But because within us we're used to blaming, that's why then we start fighting amongst ourselves. Because we're used that anything, if it goes wrong, we must blame somebody. So I'm saying we need to first look at the current challenge that we are at now, and one by one deal with them one by one, instead of grouping them as we did with apartheid. Because look, in apartheid, part of the things that prolonged the struggle was not really because apartheid was that powerful, but it was because amongst us as people we were not united, and that's what made us not to be strong to defeat that system.
Sibusiso, I'm from Mpumalanga, from a township called Pinari. I studied at the University of Johannesburg mechanical engineering. Currently, I'm employed as a quality manager at Transfix Transformers. I live in Bloemfontein. Thanks.
Even if we could see it, but we would blame it to apartheid, that we were divided because of apartheid. So I'm saying we had somebody to blame, but today we don't have anyone to blame. That's why then we fight amongst ourselves, because we're looking for that one person to blame, because we're used to blaming. And that's why today, if anything goes wrong, the first people that we point at is what? Is government. Even things that we can do for ourselves. I mean, I'll give an example. You come from a rural area, right? I come from a rural area. At home, out of 5 siblings that I have, including myself, I'm the first to go to tertiary. But having to go to tertiary, it was a challenge for me to acquire information, how to access tertiary. Because generally it was known that no, tertiary is only for people with money, So I'm saying things like NSFAS we were not aware about, you would not know how to apply. Basic information. Now, that is information that I needed to have. Now I'm saying to you, amongst us as the so-called young adults of today, who had the opportunity to break through, at least to get to tertiary and study, and at least get the so-called jobs that we're always looking for, and get perhaps a reasonable salary to survive. How many young people have I helped in that process to just give them the same information? Because that does not need the government. Surely that doesn't. So I'm saying it's basic things like that. It's not only one area where we're going to get the answer, but it requires all of us from different spheres. All of us have got different roles to play, but the problem is that we don't want to take responsibility. We always want to look for somebody to blame. So that at the end of the day, if things are not going wrong, we say, but it is because of her. If things are not going wrong, it's because of him. Even in areas where we could do something about it. And I'm saying that's for me, that's what we need to do. We need to sit down, identify all these problems, confront them individually. Until we do so, I don't think we would really be able to move forward.
Yeah, just to interject there, we've got this, as the youth of South Africa, we've got this bring him or her down syndrome. Whereas we are not about empowering the next person, but bringing them down so that we can uplift our so-called egos. Because if you find that there are so many opportunities where you could just assist, you don't need resources, it is just through your knowledge that you've acquired. And then another thing is, with our education system, we are studying about, for example, when you go into gender studies, you are studying about statistics in America, in USA, all across like other countries, European countries. But when it comes down to South Africa, there's nothing there. They just tell you about, oh, gender mainstreaming, SALGA. But is that enough? When you look at institutions, when you're looking at who's lecturing you, is it enough? There are men, there are a lot of men there. The gender mainstreaming process is not there. So how do they now teach us about this gender mainstreaming without putting it into action? We've got this thing of borrowing curriculums from other countries that are not speaking specifically to our struggle as the youth. So how do we then say, government, this is not speaking to our struggle. You are equipping us with these skills, but we do not know how to use them because they're not relevant to our environment.
Look, I want to come back to the question of education. As to whether our education system basically, is it working for us? Is it useful? Look, for me, I think there are two things here. It's one thing to be educated. It's another thing to be skilled. I can argue that you can be skilled without being educated. And you can be educated and not be skilled. Now, I'm saying the common challenge we have in South Africa, and I'm reiterating this, is that we've got so many educated people without skills. Because they are educated. They are electrical engineers, they are mechanical engineers, they are all these fancy, terms or qualifications of education. But these people are unable to make use of those education that they've acquired in paper. They are unable to actually, project it into practice, make use of them in practice, which, in my terms, that will be skill. Because if they are able to apply that, that is skill. Now, I'm saying we need skills as opposed to just education. Now, what has been the problem in South Africa is that education has been fashioned. That when you get educated, then you stand a better chance to be successful. But I'm saying, yes, you get a better chance to be successful only and only if you get a job. And that's what the education system is doing for us today. That's why if we've got these qualifications, we've got so many graduates sitting at home and can't do nothing and can't make a living. Because education has been fashioned that if you are educated, you're able to succeed. But the success that is aligned to that education that they talk about is getting a job. So education, our education guarantees us a job. But the job is not available. So that is the challenge that we have. But I want to come back to the question of material versus freedom.
Yes.
You see, again, we need to go back and understand where we're coming from. You see, we come from a disadvantaged background where materials are basically sort of yes, they represent wealth, and sort of when you've got material, basically it's like a luxury. If you've got material, you're a better person. But you must understand what caused that. Remember, during apartheid, we were disadvantaged from getting material, resources, finances, economic ultimately. It was left with the other race. For us, we were only left on the other side and only just acquired a limited portion of it. And immediately when we got this freedom or democracy, what happens is that now the doors were sort of open to say, okay, everyone has the opportunity now to acquire that. But understanding that from where we're coming from, we're disadvantaged, we're frustrated, we did not have these things. The first thing that came into all of us is that when we get into freedom, okay, if you get into government, we'll be able to acquire this material, and ultimately we'll be the same as our counterparts, the whites, because they were at the time during apartheid, they were better positioned, all the material they had. And that's why now in government, without really justifying why you've got so much corruption, which must really, really be dismissed. But I'm saying we need to understand what caused that. People understood that if you're in government, you stand a better chance to live a better life. Because during apartheid, the whites were in government and they were living large. Life was good. So that's the perception that we also had, that if you get into government, our life will be better. And that's why that now today, democracy is associated with material. That, if you're in government, freedom means that you must acquire material. Now, but it goes beyond that. After acquiring that material, what did you do with that material? Indeed, I agree to some degree that we do need this material for us to survive and perhaps to better our people and to better our lives in general. But I'm saying, the challenge that we have now is that when we're in the process of acquiring this material, we don't understand how do we make use of this material in the good way. Instead, we're sort of selfish. We leave it to ourselves to say, it's a question of survival. Today, being government is a question of survival. That, meanwhile I'm in office, I must be able to survive. I must be able to, to make all means possible to sustain myself, such that if tomorrow I'm told that there's the door open for you, I'll be able to sustain myself. But because the thinking was that when in government, you'll acquire material. Because in apartheid, those that were in government, they were living better. So I'm saying those that understand that you don't understand. So we need to change that perception about government. And this is where it comes back to my early argument around the political parties. To say that political parties should not only, their existence should not only be about and only about just contesting elections, going to parliament and end there. Because most political parties, they exist for that. They only exist during elections, and then they go into parliament. With all due respect, those old people, you see them, they're watching parliament live, they're sleeping. Because for them, it had nothing to do about taking the country forward. But it had everything to do about them acquiring means to survive, to get salary. And I'm saying that is the challenge that we have, because that is the perception that we have that relates to freedom. And that's why today, young people of today, we associate government and freedom with material. Because we think that when I'm in government, I'm going to have money. If I've got friends in government, I'm going to have tenders. That's why young people today, they run into tenders, because they think that's the easy way out, because that's the only way that you'll survive. Because that's the perception that's been created, that in government. And again, in the same breath, this is also aligned with the perception, or rather that thinking that, you know what, everything else you must expect, and you'll only get it from government. Look, all of us, we know, this is an open, economics will tell you, it's an open truth that is known that the economy of this country, the major role players in the economy of this country is not the public sector, but it's the private sector. And yet, all of us are looking in the private sector. For me, it's like there is this big pie and this small piece of cake. All of us were busy fighting over this small piece, while there's this huge pie which we're not looking at, and we're saying this is not our area. If we're saying it's not our area, whose area is it?
Yes.
So there is more to this than just the question of material. But we need to understand why that perception. Why do we have that perception, thinking that in government you get, when you're in government of freedom, you get material? So there is more to this. My argument in general, and in all of these issues, as I said, we need to identify all of this, but I'm saying, after I identify them, we need to exercise our ability to think and look beyond what created that outlook that you see today. Not just argue it based on face value, to say, everyone thinks that in government, there's money in government. If you are in government, you'll have money. It's tenders, it's because it's corruption. But we need to dig deep and say, why? What causes the corruption? What makes people to think that with corruption, this is the only way to survive? What makes people to actually want to do corruption as a means of survival? So I'm saying those are the questions that we need to do. We need to rather interrogate for us to get to the solutions.
Well, another thing is we've got this misconception of unemployment. What is actually unemployment? Because we've been given this definition, unemployment is the fact that you are not getting an income. But to be employed is to put effort to. So when you're at the back of your garden and you're planting seeds, that is employment. In essence, the seeds will grow and you'll have a plant there which you can utilize in order to gain that income. So our people are used to being fed this information through the same education system of the who of the oppressor. Now we are studying the same system which is telling us that you are not good enough because you are unemployed. So now how do we then say we do not want this system? We want a system that is speaking to us and that is by us through the exercising of our ethical right to vote. How do we then say that, fine, this is our ethical right to vote. How do we then scrutinize and say that this party has been coming here for 5 years, we have had enough. But when we're saying that we have not had enough, it doesn't mean that we should not vote. We have to exercise that ethical right because our forefathers fought for that. It's ethical for you to vote to make the correct decision.
Okay. You touched a very important point there when you were busy outlining the definition of what is unemployment. About a young person doing some small farming at the back of the yard. Africa, as it stands today, about